I'm Sarah Pitcock. I'm the CEO of the National Summer Learning Association. And thank you all for coming. We have a great panel and a great discussion today. I am supposed to say that the views of the panelists are their own and not of the institutions they represent, because this is being filmed. So, done with that. I'm going to do a little bit of overview and some context on just kind of where we are in summer learning right now to set the stage for our panel, and then we'll move into the panel session, and we'll have some time for Q&A. That's me. I'm going to introduce our panel. This is Elizabeth Abitanto. She's the college-bound director at the New Jersey Law and, I think I always do this wrong, Law, Education, and Empowerment Project. Is that right? Okay. It's Elizabeth. We also have Wida Amir, who's the director of Global Kids here in Washington, D.C., and they are going to talk about their programs in a minute. We have Rich Berlin, who's the CEO of Harlem RBI in Harlem. And finally, Brian King, who's the program director of the Hasbro Summer Learning Initiative that is in Massachusetts. All right, so if you're not familiar with NSLA, we are the only national nonprofit organization that's dedicated to closing the achievement gap by increasing access to high-quality summer learning programs. And we do this in three main ways. We work to recognize and disseminate what works. So we're a curator and translator of research. We recognize a variety of program models that are working and try to kind of put those in front of decision makers, policy makers, education leaders. Welcome. We also develop and deliver capacity building offerings for both programs and also for summer learning systems. So we work with a lot of cities and increasingly some states. Come on in. I just went ahead and started. And finally, we really work to make sure that summer learning is a part of conversations about K-12 education and expanded learning more broadly. We know that we're all working on the same goals. We care about the same kids. So we are really trying to demonstrate how summer learning programs can help to accelerate and help further all of the goals that people who work with kids share. So I'm going to talk a little bit about why summer matters, and some of this might be obvious, but some might not be. So this is a great quote I like to share. It says, "It may seem counterintuitive, but schools don't seem to produce much of the disparity in test scores between high and low income students. There is some evidence that achievement gaps actually narrow during the 9-month school year, but they widen again in the summer months." And this kind of turns on its head the assault on teachers in schools that we've seen so much in recent years. There's a lot of evidence that the achievement gap at a minimum remains constant during the 9 months of the school year. Where it widens is very often in the summer. So that's why we exist as an organization, and that's really why we're here today. So you can imagine why that gap happens in the summer. There's something called the faucet theory that I think explains it well. So even though we know that public schools are of unequal quality, they have unequal resources invested in them, solely by having access to a school, any school, kids are guaranteed access to a variety of resources. They get books, they get meals, they get caring adults, they get structured activities. In the summer months, when the school doors are closed, for many low-income children, they lose access to all of those resources. They don't have meals. They don't have books at home. They might not have a teacher that can help them or structured activities. So there's this huge imperative, a moral imperative, an economic imperative around taking care of our kids during the summer months and ensuring that those opportunities exist for them. So this is data from a pretty seminal study that kind of lays right out for you what summer learning loss actually looks like. We know from more than 100 years worth of research that all kids lose math skills in the summer without practice, 2 to 3 months worth of their grade level skills. But what we've learned more recently is that low-income kids lose 2 to 3 months worth of reading skills, while higher-income kids continue learning on basically the same trajectory whether they're in school or not. So it's kind of hard to see from where you are, but if you can see the sort of peach bars, those are the summers. And in Baltimore City, like in many districts, kids are given tests in the spring and then back in the fall when they come back to school. So you can kind of isolate summer achievement. The lowest line is the lowest income children in the district, middle income is the middle line, and highest income is the highest line. So you see that they start school, at slightly different levels over on the far left-hand side. They achieve at about the same rate during the white space of the school year, and then you see during those peach bars of the summer, the achievement really dips lowest for the lowest income kids, and those highest income kids continue learning basically at the same rate, whether they're in school or not. What I also want to point out is just that the gap widens over time. Summer learning loss is cumulative. So this gap here from this data, by the end of 5th grade, those kids on the lowest line are 2.5 years behind the kids on the highest line. And the majority of that can be attributed to summer learning loss. The good news is that summer learning works. We've been around for almost 25 years focused on this issue. There are a lot of really excellent and proven programs across the country that have been shown to move academic skills, graduation rates, school year attendance and behavior, a variety of really great indicators. We've seen voluntary programs, mandatory programs, at-home programs all make an impact. Quality is increasingly well-defined, and at the end of our session today, I'll share with you some of the really seminal resources on quality and on the research base of summer learning. And summer learning is cost-effective and can be really targeted to the kids who need it most. So here's the context piece I just wanted to share with you. New research came out, I believe, in December on a national survey on summer learning participation. So participation is up since 2009 when we last did this survey. So about 33% of families reported that at least one child participated in a summer learning opportunity. More than half of families who are not participating said they would like to if there was a program available to them. 13% reported their program was no cost, but of those who paid, which was the vast majority, the average cost was $250 per week for a summer program, which is obviously extremely cost prohibitive for the 50% of school-age kids who live in poverty in our country. Additionally, and I mentioned this earlier, access to meals is incredibly low in the summer. This is both an administrative uptake problem because there's so much red tape around becoming a summer feeding site, but also kind of a stigma problem of kids and families not wanting to go to the summer meal site in the summer and get those meals. So my slides seem to be advancing on their own. Let me see if I can, we'll just deal with it. So 85% of kids who get their meals at the school during the school year lose access to those meals in the summer. So food insecurity and hunger are tremendous issues in the summer. And you're seeing in communities that don't have the funding to run a comprehensive summer program for their kids, they're getting really innovative about it, at a minimum getting meals to their kids in the summer. Summer jobs work. There's been 2 really compelling randomized controlled trial studies released this year about summer jobs programs in Chicago and New York City, showing really strong impacts on earnings, on juvenile crime rates, incarceration, and even mortality. Kids who participated in New York City's summer jobs programs were less likely to die, in the short term, 5 years out, than kids who didn't. But the waiting lists for these programs are in the thousands. So I have this example from New York City, which is pretty stark. They only served 36% of the kids who applied. It's pretty common. Ever since 2008, there's not federal funding anymore for summer jobs programs. So it's really been up to cities and mayors, and they've done a good job trying, but the demand far outpaces the supply. And last, this is my parents just don't understand slide. We have some work to do to build understanding and change perceptions among parents about summer learning loss. As I mentioned, there is a big stigma in a lot of communities that summer school is for dumb kids, and my kid's not dumb, so my kid's not going. And you can see 60% don't believe their children experience summer learning loss. Only 17% prioritize summer reading. And then finally, a little bit of the look of the state policy landscape. We see a lot of tremendous opportunity, a lot of states that are taking up this issue. We're tracking 118 bills right now. Only 15 of those include appropriations for summer learning, but they total over $130 million. So states are really starting to take this issue on for a variety of reasons. It might be to advance their workforce goals. It might be to advance their third grade reading goals. There's just a lot of really interesting stuff happening on the state level. And I think that was it. So as a group, as a panel, we, in prepping to talk to you today, kind of came up with 2 questions that we have for our peers and our colleagues. The first is, how do we advocate for high-quality summer learning opportunities at scale while maintaining the diversity and integrity of programs? And I think this is, a big question. And second, how can we broaden the conversation about what success looks like in summer learning and in expanded learning more general? I think these are both themes I've already heard here today. So I think they're resonating, and we're going to try to talk about that a little bit from the panelists' perspectives. So I'm going to ask each of our panelists, starting with Elizabeth, to do a short introduction of their program. So just so you know, one of the things NSLA does is recognize a handful of exemplary programs every year with something called the Excellence in Summer Learning Award. We've been doing it for 10 years now, so there's about 35 award-winning programs that are really our go-to. These are incredible programs that are doing amazing things for kids. More than 100 programs apply every year. We only award about 3 per year. So all of these folks here come from these programs that are really leading the way for the field. So that's why they're here. And Elizabeth, if you kick us off by telling us a little bit about NJ Leap.
Oh, hi everyone, I'm Elizabeth.
And you have a microphone that you should use. Yeah.
Hello, I'm Elizabeth, or Liz Abitanto, from NJ Leap, or New Jersey Law Education Empowerment Project. We are a out-of-school college-bound program. We work with students throughout their 4 years, after school, on Saturdays, and in the summers. We do programs such as life skills. They take a life skills course, Saturday writing classes, SAT prep, constitutional law debates, and then we walk them through and navigate the college application process for them and their families. We do parent workshops, have a parent council, et cetera, in order to empower our students as we hope to teach them not only the hard skills, but the soft skills they'll need to get into top-tier colleges and then graduate in 4 years.
Great. So, Wida?
Hi, good afternoon, everybody. It's a small group. I've never really used the mic when I speak, so this is interesting. I am the program director here in DC. I oversee our programs here locally. We are Global Kids is an organization that's been around for 25 years. We started in New York City, and our mission and vision really is around global education or global learning, as well as youth development. We ensure that young people really gain the skills, the knowledge, the experiences, and a lot of the values that will create them into change makers in their communities, as well as what we say the global stage. As we all know that, we're all global citizens in this day and age, particularly when it comes to the virtual access. Everyone is connected to one another throughout the world. Our young people engage in a lot of peer education, service learning, service action campaigns, as well as community sort of civic participation within our programs. We have a lot of digital media program, as well as very traditional sort of workshops around human rights, about being participants in the sort of diplomatic or in a diplomatic sort of world. We have been in DC for a little bit over 4 years, and our goal and our vision to come to DC was to really bridge the gap, as we've been hearing throughout the morning and throughout the day, where sort of one side of town has a lot of access to opportunities and the other side does not. So in particular, DC, which is known as the International Hub, DC public school students really lack access and opportunity to what DC actually has to offer. So we expanded to DC to make sure that those young people really have access to what everyone else, those who are fortunate, particularly students who come from sort of, privileged families and backgrounds, who come to DC to take advantage of those opportunities, but DC local students do not, urban students in particular. So we're here to bridge that gap, and I'm sure we'll talk more about other details.
Thanks. Rich?
I'm Rich Berlin. I'm the executive director of Harlem RBI, which is a 24-year-old community-based organization working in East Harlem and now Mott Haven in the South Bronx in New York City, serving close to 2,000 children in a whole range of programs and services, after school, family services, a charter school, and different engagements. But we started as an inner city Little League baseball program, serving 75 teenage boys at the time. And so, as you can imagine, summer is a pretty important place for us. I think I'm going to focus my comments today in particular around our middle school program called Team Builders, which is probably our most intense point of engagement with young people in out of school time, including a program which runs 3 hours a day, 5 days a week for 40 weeks a year during the school year, and 8 hours a day, 6 days a week for 8 weeks every summer. And both because we love middle school and we love out of school time and we love alternative ways of engaging, we think this is a terrific place to start with kids. So we'll get into that a bit too.
Great. Brian?
Hi, my name is Brian King. I'm the director of the Hasbro Summer Learning Initiative. The initiative is a region-wide initiative. It's in Western Massachusetts. Our goal is to obviously improve the opportunities for low-income kids to access quality summer learning programs. We work with over 30 different community-based organizations, schools and school systems, to work with them to improve quality and their resources available to have high-quality summer learning programs for low-income youth. Western Massachusetts, in our county, Hampden County, is where I'm located, where we serve primarily low-income youth there. We have 2 out of the 6 most underperforming school districts there, Holyoke and Springfield, so there's a huge need. So another big part of our goal is to increase opportunities for the children to improve literacy skills through the summertime as well. We provide programs with resources such as thematic curriculum. We give them money, we give them training, and we work very closely to collaborate around improving their quality continuously. I think anything else to say about what we do? We also, across the board, are leveraging resources. So not only are we working with the organizations, we really are trying to become an intermediary that's working with the whole system, aligning school and out of school time to better improve the educational outcomes for low-income youth in that area.
Thank you. So as you heard, I think most, if not all, of our panelists run programs year-round, and that's kind of a theme that I want to be prevalent. This is a discussion about summer learning, but we know that kids need after-school programs, they need summer programs, and we also know that those 2 inputs work really well together for kids. So I'm going to start by asking Rich, what are the benefits of running programs year-round, and how do you think your summer program supports or enhances your school year programs?
Yeah, so particularly for middle school, which is where we're focused today. So middle schoolers hate adults, right? Especially the ones they love, actually. But they love each other a lot, and they love being together and talking how much they hate adults and plotting against the adults. And for us, in some sense, as you heard, right, kids are with us every day during the school year, 3 hours a day, and right, so it's a pretty formal program. Like, right, there's an academic block and a SEL block and a physical ed, enrichment, team building, sports block, but that's pretty formal in its own way. And the kids have just come out of a pretty extended time of formality from the school day, and I think what we have found is the summertime, which is in some sense equally formal, but in some sense has much more room for kids to be kids, playing on a baseball or softball team, being involved in projects outside of classrooms, whether that's service learning or working as peer mentors or a host of other items. And in doing so, kids sort of bond in all these ways. They don't arrive to us having to unpack their day. They come back, and for us it's 6 days a week, so they're never even that far away from us. And so the impact of this is that they love each other even more, and maybe even by the end of the summer they hate the adults even less. So I think for us and for our kids, even though it is only 6, 7, 8 weeks, I think the summer does a lot to keep kids connected over the school year. Now, in our case, like playing on a team is a big hook, and you're on that team all year long, but the season only runs from April until August, and there is this time in January when it's been too far from when the season ended and it's too far from when the season begins that you start to really and it's dark and cold, that you really start having to fight. But I do think there is this lure and pull of this amazing space and this intensity of space which kids have with each other and adults that really does more work than in just the time itself.
Thanks. Liz, NJ Leap is also year-round. You mentioned your Saturday programs. Can you talk a little bit about the interplay between your after-school and your summer programs and sort of the benefits of going year-round?
Absolutely. So similar to what Rich said is when you have the kids for however many weeks in the summer, you have the most impact on them. You see them every day. You have those long, like the relationships and the talks that you have, and then the academic programming, right, that helps build their skills. But the idea, too, that if you don't have them in the summer, they lose all the skills and everything that they learned during the year is similar to how we feel about if we don't have them during the school year, right? And so it's important that the skills they learn in the summer are also transferred to the rest of the years and the rest of their lives. And just a quick example is we have a rigorous SAT program for our juniors. And so we know that if we don't get them throughout the school year, their schools are not giving them SAT prep. They literally stop the prep. We work with high school students, and we want to say that they're learning the skills, but they still are very challenged, and they don't have the necessary skills to learn to teach themselves those skills or to practice SAT problems on their own. And so it really is, our jobs and what we think is important to have them throughout the whole school year. And also, just to add on to what Rich was saying, is that we build trust in not only the students that come our way, but also the families. And so when we're making, college decisions, the parents trust what we're saying, right? That we're not guiding them in the wrong way. That now we've worked with them throughout the 4 years, and we have their best interests in mind.
Mm-hmm. Thanks. So, in addition to running programs year-round, these providers they basically commit to kids for multiple years. So they offer a continuum of programming. In Rich's case, it's from kindergarten all the way through college. NJ Leap is the 4 years of high school, very intentionally. But they offer a continuum, and they commit to kids for multiple years, which maybe sounds like a no-brainer, an aha, or not an aha, but that's not always the case with summer programs. The funding is so tenuous for summer programs that very often a program is here today and gone tomorrow and back in 3 years when times are better. So the fact that these programs can commit to kids for multiple years is what makes their outcomes so strong. So I'm going to ask Brian to talk a little bit about that from Hasbro's perspective. So how do you think that offering that continuum really helps your program?
All right. So working with multiple programs, I have the advantage of seeing lots of different things in the summer and a huge range of quality. But I think I'm going to sound like a broken record by the end of today. But when you walk into a program, sometimes you can instantaneously know what's happening, and it's usually because of the looks of the faces of the children and of the adults. And you walk into one and you see a lot of crying and yelling and screaming. It sounds ridiculous, but that happens a lot. But sometimes you walk into a program and all of a sudden, out of nowhere, all the kids will do something spontaneous, like clap their hands 2 times and then say something, and then you say, I've got this sense that there's a camp culture here. If any of you have ever gone to summer camp or been part of a summer program where there's all these little things you need to know how to do, and there's all of these I'll call them cultural structures that sort of make you feel comfortable because you know what you're supposed to do and what's expected. So what I've seen looking at multiple programs, the ones that are really have the strongest program cultures are those that are really committed to the youth through their development. But then also where they have a strong connection where the staff are also then, because they've had such a positive experience, are then becoming the staff. So we see in those programs where you have a much stronger common expectations of the purpose and what the program is for. There's greater communication of the practices and behavior and the expectations so that everyone's on the same page, which is, summer's short, really is. A 6-week summer program goes by quickly. So having all of these reinforcing aspects where there's an expectation and a culture to the program, I think that that's achieved a lot by having multiple years. Now, also, though, the biggest point, and I guess I'll leave it with that, is that we know that the single most important thing that's going to contribute to positive outcomes for youth and the quality of a program is the relationship between the youth and the adults. It's that, to me, that's simple. So, I think that having multiple years, you have the opportunity and the time. And I guess I also advocate that summer is also an opportunity and time to forge those meaningful relationships and those connections that will lead to, well, I call them, being able to advocate for the child, being able to have empathy for the child, and having really high expectations through that summertime. So I think that it is a no-brainer. I thought about this long and hard, and I thought, I don't think there's any advantage except for the idea that, yes, you want to have children access programs and you want to make sure everyone gets an opportunity. But if obviously if we had our way and everything was there, we would be able to support kids in these meaningful environments over time.
Thanks. Rich, so as I mentioned, your program serves kids from kindergarten on, invites them to come back and work in the program. Can you kind of talk about how that continuity builds the fabric of Harlem RBI?
So first is to say there's one way it isn't a no-brainer, and that is you have to pay for it. And that is hard, right? That's a really long span that requires multiple competencies and different types of knowledge in your organization, and I think is particularly challenging at scale. But but I agree, it's the right thing to do, or at least, and if you're not doing it yourself, you at least find a place to move your kids into. So for I think the one point I latch on to is sort of how you keep culture over time for kids too, and I do think it is young people who go from being recipients of a service to active participants and kids who are teaching, peer mentoring, coaching, tutoring their younger peers, and literally know the definition of quality because they've experienced various levels of it in their own experience, but if you're doing your work the right way, they probably know the difference more than anybody. And even as the adults in your program change, which happens a lot, particularly at scale, and the different types of funding and staffing stuff you put together, whether it's AmeriCorps or volunteers or part-timers, and we do all of those things. The kids really hold on and build and drive culture in the organization. By that I mean older youth teaching younger ones. And the other thing I would say about continuity over time is it provides I think a little bit of shelter from the pressure around kind of these very difficult to measure interstitial outcomes. People want to know social emotional learning impacts in middle school. Well, in an out of school time setting, and I want to blow my brains out because, I don't know, come to one of our baseball practices and we'll let the kids explain that to you. But we want to be more sophisticated about that than that, and so we work on it. But really for us, college and career readiness is the end goal for our kids, and a long enough track record of doing this where virtually all our kids do graduate high school, almost all of them do go to college, and we can do some real work to tie our impact, our influence on that, I think holds folks at bay a little bit and even makes that much stronger a case for the sort of experiential learning that we do on a daily basis.
Thanks. So I really liked what Deputy Mayor Bury said in his remarks about, I don't go to my son's Little League coach and ask him to show me evidence of his impact, right? We have to just value experiences. And this is a tension that's very real in expanded learning, and I'm not sure it's any more acute in the summer than it is in the school year, but we feel it, and all of these providers feel it. So Liz, I'm going to ask you to talk a little bit about how you balance the pressure to produce and promote academic gains with the desire to offer the kinds of life experiences that higher income youth get in the summer and get out of school.
Repeat that one more time.
Yeah, how do you balance the pressure to produce academic gains with the desire to offer the kinds of life experiences and maybe non-academic gains that higher income youth get in the summer?
We don't see them as mutually exclusive. So we see them being as one and the same, right, in order to holistically approach the child and to get them to the places we want to see them in their future. And so exposure is a big part of that. And our threefold model is skills, habits, and exposure. Exposure being the last piece, right? And so a lot of our students don't see their parents get dressed in suits and go out into the workforce. Many times they have lower level jobs, and so that's all they're exposed to. And the communication skills, right? The email communication that they're gonna need in order to enter the workforce is really what they're getting through our program that many of their peers are not receiving. And so, you know, anywhere from the college visits. So when we do our college visits, we don't do enough, but when we do them, we tell our students dress business casual, at most business professional. And so they, you know, moan, but I'm like, it's gonna set you apart, right, from the other students, because some of these students have been visiting schools since they were 13, and so your competition is far more advanced, and you sort of have to put yourself out there that way. All of our students receive mentors and that sort of adult relationship that they may not be receiving, or professional adult relationship, they get through that program. And our life skills class alone teaches them conflict resolution, sex and sexuality, helping them make informed decisions, let's say professional development skills and all those things. And so we integrate it into our programming. And so it's not just academic, but it's really the social emotional skills that they're gonna need in order to enter the workforce, right, and to college and to be successful at it.
Mm-hmm. Thank you. I asked this question of Liz because when I visited NJ Leap, I was so struck by everything that I saw. But, you know, I talk all the time about leveling the playing field. You know, that's what we're trying to do, right, is level the playing field. And then I get to a program like that where I'm not sure they're leveling the playing field. I think they're giving these kids a tremendous advantage. And we shouldn't be afraid to reach for that. So the fact that they're getting a professional network and a social network and all of these things that higher income kids get as part of their life is
If
incredible.
I could just add a little bit too, and I know you've said it a lot, but high expectations is a big thing for us. So many times our kids, and I'm sure the rest of your kids, go to schools and they do the bare minimum, and they're like, that's okay. You came to class, like you did your part, right? And it's not about that for us. It's making sure that we set very high expectations for our students and that they meet it. And there's no excuses. We have a very no excuse, very zero tolerance policy in our program, and that's not just for our kids, but our families too. And so it sort of trickles down into like how they perform and how they do in school.
And visiting Global Kids for the first time was a similar experience for me. When I was there, it was just after the Arab Spring. The program consisted of a lot of refugee students, a lot of students who were very new to this country, let alone this program. And what struck me at Global Kids was that they were being asked, kids who had never probably been called on by their teacher because they were the quiet, shy one who struggled with English maybe, what they thought about human rights, what they thought about religious tolerance, and what the Arab Spring meant to them. And they, played Pictionary and acted it out. But again, the expectations were so high, and it goes so far beyond maybe something you can capture on a standardized test. But I'd love if you could talk, Wita, about how you balance those tensions at Global Kids between the need to help these kids, succeed academically, but also provide that kind of life experience.
And to go back to your original question a little bit, to tie it back in terms of how do we provide our young people with the sort of really high quality learning and experience that a lot of other students get throughout the year. So our program, our summer program in particular, is a 5-week intensive foreign relations, foreign affairs type of institute. So urban young people who see a lot of these issues on the news, they don't really have an outlet to actually discuss these items. I mean, we had, for example, during the Ebola outbreak here in DC, there was a little bit of news that locally here in DC someone was infected and so on and so forth. So this year for the summer, our Summer Institute will conclude with a trip for our young people to South Africa. And when we proposed that conversation, a few of our students actually said, oh, Africa, that's where Ebola is. Are you guys sure you want to take us to South Africa? So these are sort of the issues that we discuss with our young people. Geography, human rights issues, very, very complex global issues that they absolutely have no way to dissect and understand and then engage in a conversation. We also bring them speakers and guest speakers who are high-level, experts, policy experts, international relations experts, former diplomats, ambassadors. We take them to embassies. A lot of our students get their passports for the first time and then eventually travel internationally for the first time. So this is sort of where we push the envelope, where in many communities and many students have been traveling since they were a child, and they've been exposed, and they already know geography. So that's sort of where we really try to level the playing field, as well as actually really expedite it and push it even further through a 5-week intensive program, and then, of course, a year-long program modeled during the school year.
Thank you. I'm going to ask you another question, Wida. So
Yeah.
we've heard a lot today about kind of the ups and downs of doing this work. I've mentioned that summer funding is tenuous. It's very often in the good times, let's have summer programs. When we had stimulus funding, boy, did kids have a couple of really great summers in urban cities. But when that funding was gone, so were the programs. So I want to ask you, Wida, to reflect a little bit, from sort of an external perspective, what has been most helpful and what has been most hurtful to your program's growth?
So we started in New York City 25 years ago, and it was really fascinating to see a lot of New York City being represented today during the panel as sort of the model organizations and the leaders and policy and after-school programs are all pioneers who are from New York City. This is where Global Kids started, and we have been extremely successful. Our brand is very well known, along with our partners. But the success has been, I think, also largely thanks to the backup of these leaders, right? So the mayor believes in our programs and after-school programs and the model funding. There's DYCD, it's a city institution that actually is responsible for funding a lot of our organizations. There's TASK, there's all these institutions that are promoting and partnering and backing the work that we all do. The challenge has been, I moved from New York about 4 years ago here to DC, and I did some policy work here, and then I sort of jumped back to youth work because I wanted to see and feel real change, and the halls of Congress was not happening. So I came back to youth work, and I realized what a challenge it is to actually run programs, after-school programs, extended learning sort of time programs here in DC, where you don't have that backing, you don't have that partnership, and you don't actually have those leaders. No offense to the mayor, she has just started, but her current budget cut 70% of the out-of-school time budget for the district's out-of-school time program department, 70%. In DC is experiencing 50% budget cuts for the entire after-school sort of initiative and programs. So this whole concept of after-school funding and then moving on to extended learning time, which is even beyond, we're not even talking about during school day, is almost non-existent. It's the culture, the language, the pioneers don't really exist. And this is maybe New York City sort of coming in and talking about DC, but it's really a reality in DC public school sort of space or after school space. So that's a huge challenge in terms of continuing to do what we do best. And I'm sure California has similar examples of very dedicated funding to after school programs or the work that we do that's sort of non-compromisable. It's super small, but it's still something.
Yeah, thank you.
I might have taken 5 minutes
better,
instead of, I feel a little bit passionate.
We needed to get that out. Brian, you have talked a lot about system building, and you've also done some state-level advocacy. Can you talk about what's been helpful and what's been hurtful to your program's growth?
Yeah, I think that's what has been most helpful is that, see, I knew my phone was going to start to talk, is really the partnerships that Lita was talking about. I mean, the fact that you think about it, we run summer programs, and I reflect about how many conversations I need to have to get this all to work. It's sort of amazing. So you're in connection with the mayor's office, Parks and Rec, the city library system, the school system, the community-based organizations, the youth works group. I mean, so there's a huge collaboration. So what's been most helpful for me has been to really ride the collaboration level. I sort of have this mantra, which sometimes gets a laugh, but there's also a lot of competition, you know, for all these programs. And I say, no one's going to get rich off this. We're not even going to get famous. You know, all we can do is leverage our resources, and that's been really helpful. But also on that note, also going up to the state and national level. So I think what's been really helpful to our initiative, you know, supporting community-based organizations and schools to improve academic outcomes in the summer, has been National Summer Learning Association to have a Summer Learning Day, that we bring attention to the importance of summer learning, and that type of advocacy is crucial. And also I think that also the importance of like the Annie Casey Foundation, who's had an initiative around reading proficiency by 3rd grade. That has helped our cause. They identified summer learning as one of their 3 strategies to address reading proficiency. And there's other initiatives to make it more relevant to middle school. I think there's a United Way, and I'm not sure, but there's a new middle school, you know, staying in school movement national. And I think that those help us a lot because it gives us a research base, it gives us common ground and acknowledgement. So the research in all of this has been very helpful, and the advocacy of that has been very helpful. At the same time, what makes it all difficult, I think that, and I've been thinking a lot about that today, is that, you know, what are we showing as our outcomes? And I think this has been expressed here too, is that I look at Hasbro Summer Learning Initiative, and when I report our outcomes for the summer, my funders want to know, did we stem summer learning loss, and what was the bottom line? You know, did you go up or go down, or did you stay the same? And we've been really working on our assessment. And the truth is that, being a truthful guy that I am, it's really hard to communicate those other successes that we have. And they're not, and where the funders aren't necessarily as interested. And on the other side of that too is that where the funders are really dedicated to their own causes or to their own measures or to their own outcomes. So balancing both the need for the collaboration, but then also managing the collaboration so that it's not all of a sudden you're not just an implementer. I mean, I think it's really important that our programs remain the expertise in the field. We should be informed by best practices, but I think there's a challenge when the money that we're trying to get is designated for a particular best practice. Mm-hmm. So those are some of the big issues, but we are funded year to year, and it makes it very hard to have, you know, system planning. And my last point will be, you know, when you're dedicated and dependent upon you know, the 3rd largest public school in Massachusetts, I mean, it's just fraught with opportunities.
Yeah. Thanks. So for my last question before we come to you guys, I'm going to ask for more time, Laura, because we started late, so just don't hold me to it. Okay. Briefly, if you can, share an anecdote that kind of demonstrates how you know your program is successful. And we're taking a broad view of success, but, you know, how do you know, and we'll start with you, Liz, if you're ready, that your program is successful?
So 4 years ago, so we are a young organization. We're graduating our first seniors in college now. And so it's Fatima Jafiq, and we have a waiver that says we can talk about the students because we're a legal program, so we have waivers and contracts and all these things on our kids. But Fatima Jafiq started with us now 8 years ago. She's now at Bryn Mawr, which is an elite all-women's college. Right after, following the first year that she was with us, her sister, Salma Jafiq, entered the program. Her dad then entered our parent council and became president of our parent council. He led workshops then thereafter. She is now a junior at Mount Holyoke, which is also an all-women's elite institution as well. Your neck of the woods. And now we have their sister Zainab Jafiq, and she's in our 3rd year, in our junior year of programming, and she's doing amazing. And they set the tone for our students, their parents do, and then the buy-in we get with our families because they are essentially our family. Mm-hmm. And so that I feel to me is, or that to me is success, and knowing that we have people that believe in our mission, believe in it so much that they trust all their girls with us, or all their kids, and they go off, and particularly with this family, they go off to their mosques and tell 5 other parents or their whole congregation, right? And we get their congregation. It becomes a bigger, more extended family, and it's been a beautiful thing to see.
Great, thank you. Wida.
I think it might be similar to all of our programs. I mean, obviously, in working with young people, particularly high school students, we say young people vote with their feet. So if your program is, fully enrolled and every week they're coming consistently, and then even the following year or the following year, I think that in itself is huge success for us. That means young people really are engaged and are committed to the program, and we are doing something right, that they're actually coming back to us. And then ultimately some of our young people become staff, or we have our alums who come back as guest speakers. So that sort of, in a nutshell, talks about our success, and we know that we're doing the right thing. The other piece that I would say is that, for example, we had one young man who's been with us for 4 years, like I was mentioning earlier, receive his first passport last summer. We're having a really hard time. He wasn't from a traditional setting of a family home, mom, dad, and you needed consent, and he's under 18. And so we had to go through actually calling North Carolina and court systems and all of that to get his paperwork. And we literally got it the day before we were leaving for Costa Rica. So, the sort of that moment really encapsulated the work and the significance that our work has on young people's sort of just what happens, what kind of doors open up for them. So that was a really kind of unique moment.
Great story. Rich, how do you know your program's successful?
Reams of data, and a lot of relational stuff. I think 2 things come to mind. One is that I think we just hit the 10% mark of our full-time staff who are Harlem RBI alums, college graduates, and people who have applied for, interviewed for, and earned their job against the other population in the world. And since I'm always looking for my exit strategy from this organization, which I've led for 20 years, that's my number one. That's my number one route. So that's one. The other, since we're in D.C., is a particularly fun story of a young man named Jason Medina, who grew up in the housing projects across the street, overlooking our ball field, and joined our program pretty early, must have been mid-90s, pretty early in our existence. And very, very long story short, was your sort of classic nightmare kid, just a total head case. Very talented, a lot of natural leadership qualities and abilities, usually use them to lead kids in the wrong direction. And just like a never-ending, to the point of, just a never-ending battle with this kid. But because we stuck with him and he stuck with us for long periods of time, eventually got him to both a more focused and resilient place in his life. He graduated, did 2 years of community college, moved to Washington, D.C., became a police officer here. A couple of years ago, he broke up. He was directly involved in breaking up a shooting right in front of a public elementary school here in D.C. and probably saved a great number of kids' lives in doing so. And his commanding officer came to him to tell him, "Congratulations, thank you for this. You've been named D.C. Police Officer of the Year," and asked him what, we want to support you to do something and promote this idea. What do you want to do? And he said, "I would like to build a baseball field in the housing projects next to the school where this happened." And he started a baseball league because he wanted to do for these kids what someone did for him. So we could have a few more of those. I think we call that scaling impact, I think.
Brian, what is...
Follow that. I'll tell you right now that we've been around since 2006, and believe it or not, 80% of our participants have grown up to be president of the United States.
Just 80?
It's true. But other than that, though, I think that the data part is really important. So I do know that we stem summer learning loss, especially around literacy, and we've worked really hard to to develop that, and I think that we're doing that. But I think that the way we know we're successful is that we're doing that, and the children are not in remedial education. They're not in their school uniforms. They're not doing, specific flashcards. They're engaged in authentic learning practices where they're reading for a purpose and they're writing for a purpose and they're excited about it. And there's a lot of pushback from programs that, just like I said before, what's great about having continuum of years is it's also a problem because people want to have the program be exactly as it was when they were a kid, and bringing in literacy and these other supports that we need to do sometimes is pushback. But the big win is when they see the importance of that, and the children, and they recognize that the children really want to be reading, and that they are aware that they want to have more opportunity to practice literacy through the summer. And I think the long-winded story that I'm going to tell now is about a child who, as a result of going through this program and having opportunities to practice literacy, went home and was so excited that she was getting literacy supports and doing it through this Learning Nature that she started up a little nature program for her little sister so she would be learning literacy too, so she wouldn't have the same problems. And this inspired her mother, who saw, wow, this is a really great way that they're learning and they're doing all these things, because the daughter kept coming home and telling the stories. And then the mother saw the value of really creating these fun, engaging opportunities where children are given the opportunity to practice academics, that we don't just need to see it as a remedial, summer as a remedial time for low-income kids. So I think that's my success stories.
Thank you. We have time for a couple questions. Anybody have questions for our panel? Okay, so your hand behind, yep, you first, and then you.
To create a system for student-engaged assessment and connecting that to our longitudinal evaluation. As a former expeditionary learning teacher, I understand how kids love to graph their own progress. And I'm wondering if anybody has experience in this. Can anybody point me in a direction of a study or a practice? Because my boss seems to think I'm creating this in a vacuum. So I'm on a mission to make this happen, but I need some context.
You're looking for a student engagement measure?
Because I have it in a school setting, but I'm looking for it in an after-school or summer learning setting. So short-term measures that students create.
You should talk to Dana Fusco at York College, New York City, who does a lot of work around participatory evaluation, both staff and student-led stuff.
And I've been working with two professors at Springfield College, and they get upset with me because we really focus on engagement, and we have some frameworks, theoretical frameworks for, which is Brian Camborne. But they say that that's the wrong measure, and they think that what we should really be measuring to understand engagement is a measure of youth-adult relationship, and that would give you the same, that's a proxy for engagement. I'm not sure if I agree with that completely, but it's I think a much easier assessment to do, and it's very quick. So that's one way to go. But I'm with you, though. I'm still looking to have, I haven't found the right assessment for our program around understanding and measuring child engagement, except through ethnographies and all those other types of qualitative studies.
I think it's somewhat, I don't know if it's an easy answer, but in order for us to engage, or a way that we engage, track engagement is attendance, right? And so tracking their attendance every time a student is in, their promptness, if that seems to improve, decrease or increase, their test complete. I mean, we track literally everything the kids do. But we got even more creative than that. And in the last couple of years, we added grit to it. We realized that was a key element in success for successful individuals. And so we started to gauge their grit and how gritty they got in general, but through our program. And then lastly, we outsourced with a company, and they gauge the assets that a family has in order to see what assets they need in order to impact their child, if that makes any sense. Yeah. I don't know the company, but I could potentially look it up on my phone afterwards and give it to you. Yeah. Mm-hmm.
Do you have a question?
Thank you, guys. My name is Scott Lippman. I work with Tenacity in Boston. My question for you, each of you, or as many as we have time to hear from, is sort of as you look at a year-round model where you have programming during the year, program over the summer, and you look at your professional staff and sort of wanting to have the balance between consistency for kids and providing the relationships for kids that keep them engaged over the summer, and also giving your staff time to grow and develop and reflect so that they're not burning themselves out. I'm sort of curious about the models that you use to balance those two.
We just burn them out.
Yeah, I was gonna say. I think so, yeah.
We use a lot of young staff, and for us, right, our kids again are pretty critical in that. So we have a very large number of program alums, what we call legends, who are local college students or college students who return for the summer who have worked for us as high school students, and that is a huge portion of our summer staff and a significant portion of our after-school staff. So people working 20 hours a week in the school year, 40 hours a week in the summer, and we tend to leverage that a lot. We do, and we pay full-timers to do real jobs to do. Like, you got to have a management structure that supports that, creates room for planning, creates supports for professional development, do things that are generally considered inefficient from a traditional after-school funding model.
It's tough. We also have very young staff, and I think above all, it's dedication, right? And so it's never something that they never do things that they don't feel comfortable doing, and having that continued conversation around making sure they get self-care and that they feel comfortable doing the things that we ask, or they ask of themselves, because many times it's like volunteer things that they will add on to the programs that we have. But many times it's us forcing them to go get doctor visits, make sure that they take a day off if they need to, if they work 6 days in a row the previous week. And so it's tough. It's just finding that balance and making sure that the staff is aware that we are very cognizant of their lives and then their sort of health, right? And so to make sure that they don't get burnt out. But sometimes it happens, right? Just because they're so confident, so dedicated, and it's sometimes beyond our control.
And I think that the staff part is the crucial keystone to the whole thing. And it is the difference between quality and not quality. And so how you go about the training. I think that the hardest thing I have to convince leadership to do around their young staff, not all programs, but is to give them, to give the staff themselves choice and control to innovate with the curriculum and to work on these things, to take ownership. I've seen a lot of burnout where they're just, I've been looking at this very closely actually, but they're given curriculum and they're expected to implement it, and if they don't get it, they sort of toss it to the side and wing it. So I think that we really need to understand how to support them. I mean, they're a whole other level of youth that we're developing. Obviously, so giving them opportunities for voice and choice in the process of what they're doing and to believe in it is crucial, but difficult and expensive and time-consuming.
Okay, I'm sorry, if you have a question for them, I think come ask them afterwards. I'm gonna give a few closing announcements and resources, but first, can you join me in thanking our wonderful panel? All right. I mentioned this research on summer learning, so it's all on the Wallace Foundation's website. I just wanted to connect you with these resources. Making Summer Count is a really comprehensive literature review on summer learning. And then there's 2 additional guides from the demonstration project that they've been doing, some of the findings. NSLA has a publication coming out in mid-May called Accelerating Achievement that will be a set of case studies that demonstrate how summer learning programs are accelerating things like 3rd grade reading proficiency, middle school transitions, college and career readiness, and teacher training and retention. So keep your eye out on summerlearning.org for that. We have a pretty in-depth look at what these programs are doing, how they're funded, what they cost, and how they recommend other people try to replicate what they're doing. Currently, we have a funding roadmap available on our website. It's a great look at federal, state, and local funding for summer learning programs, again, at summerlearning.org. You heard Brian mention Summer Learning Day. It's June 19th. I highly encourage you to participate at some point in the summer in an advocacy event. We will have an interactive map on our website, hopefully starting May 1st, summerlearningday.org. Last year, we reached 350,000 kids through 700 events and programs across the country. Our goal is to actually reach 700,000 kids this year. So we're crazy. We're doubling it, but we have the fever for summer learning, and we want everyone across the country to catch it. So please do visit summerlearning.org. If you are running a program, put it on our map. We drive media to the programs that are on our map. It helps us get a great big picture of what's happening in the summer. So please do that, and then you can be a part of what will be a big spike in media on that day. Last year we were on The View and on the Today Show a couple years ago. We were with Michelle Obama last year. So it's a big day. So if you are a fan of summer learning, mark your calendar for that day. And then finally, we have a national conference on summer learning that will be right up the road in Baltimore in October. It's the only national conference that's dedicated to this issue. So it's October 12th through 14th. Registration is available now. Thank you. And I have these announcements that include things about food. So as you head back to the pavilion room, coffee and snacks are in the foyer if you need a last fix. We'll reconvene for our final panel and closing session in the pavilion room at 4:15. I have been asked to encourage anyone who would like to take home the picture frames that are the centerpieces on the tables. So feel free to take those frames. And thank you all so much for being here, and enjoy the rest of your summit.